The next presentation is from Špela Koblar from Slovenia Forest Service. She will talk about management in beech and beech fir forest in high karst of Slovenia. Hi Špela, I would like to thank you for taking your time. I know that you are currently very busy because we're in process of preparing 10-year management plans, and Špela is highly involved into this, so it was quite hard to get her to prepare this presentation. So I'm really grateful that she managed to do this, and she will have this presentation. So thank you, Špela, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miha, very much. Thank you for the opportunity that I present this Slovenian forestry, particularly in the region of Postojna regional unit. I will now share a screen. It's okay.
Yeah, we see the screen. You just need to start. Okay, now it's perfect.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I will talk about management in the forests in the high karst plateaus in Slovenia, especially in the region of SNEZNIK forests, where the component part of UNESCO beech forest lies. And to start, I'm sure you already know where is Slovenia. And we already heard yesterday something about the Slovenian forests and forestry. We are having almost 60% of forest cover, and that means that we are now we are really the tourists and all the visitors see Slovenia as a green country. Now, of course, we are waiting for spring to flourish, but it's not so green yet. But it will be very soon. So I'm looking forward for it. Maybe a little about karst. Here is a map of different karst areas in Slovenia. Altogether, we have 44% of Slovenia as a karst landscape, and that infects quite a lot also on the type of the forests and the type of the management, especially it was in the past, and I will explain why and how very soon. High karst plateaus or mountain ridges are like in red circles. The northwestern this is the northwestern part of the Nerik Mountains, which prolongs further to the southeast across Croatia and other Western Balkan countries. And this is the area where beech forests, beech and silver fir and beech forests prevail. And all this karst area is mostly consists from limestone bedrock or limestone and dolomite combination of bedrock. And what is also important is that we don't have surface water in this region on the mountains. The water streams and rivers are only present in the valleys, in folies. But in the mountains there is no streams, very scarce, very weak some springs and soil. Different layers of different types of soil is present here. Mostly or almost all over is carbonate soil, but mostly very thin layers. Maybe 5-10 centimeters, a lot of rocks on the surface, and so very harsh landscape. And actually, there is very little arable land on the mountains. So, as I said, especially above the 800 meters of sea level, Abietifagatum or silver fir and beech forest prevails, with the two main species in different percentages considering the stands. But let me start a little bit in the past, because I'm very convinced that when we are talking about the forestry and trying to understand the processes that led from the past to the present situation, to the present state, we need to know what influenced in the past. So for a forest management point of view, in most western part of the Eastern Beach, Tarnowski Ghost, it already started in 1770. And this is the area where the huge impact of mercury mine from Idria was present. Idria is mercury mine of Idria is now also in UNESCO designation, UNESCO heritage, and the demands demands of wood for mercury for the mine was very strong even from the beginning of the mining. That means from the late 15th century. So lacking of wood closer to the mine led it to spreading the area to gather this wood, to harvest this wood. And on Tarnowski Ghost, they realized that they need some kind of sustainable system that will ensure the proper or enough amounts of the timber for the mine in Idria. So they developed this management plan, and they also divided the area of 19,200 hectares into different areas, so they can assure that the stock could be yielded forever, cutting each year more or less equal annual cuts in different areas. And this is all because they wanted to keep the records about what they were doing. They also introduced some control method of this. So this is the cover of this management plan from 1770. To go closer to our region, we can look even further to Venice. Venice, as you know, in Middle Ages and later, was very influencing town or republic in the whole Mediterranean, and they also influenced the area closer to the SNEZNIK mountain. And their demands or their development, their wars they were doing, the ship, the warships and the trade ships they were doing, they were building, they demand a lot of wood, also for construction, also for firewood. So in the whole area of Mediterranean basin, they were gathering as much as possible, trading this wood and so on. Not only Venice, also, of course, all other cities that were developing in that period in the Mediterranean had similar demands. For example, they were ordering different contingents of wood for shipbuilding, and in the area where the oaks were growing, they curved the trees in a certain curves that already they have some lines to prepare in much easier way the curves for or the elements for a ship's building. That caused the complete devastation of Mediterranean that we can still observe all around. Also in Slovenia, especially in low karst region, which is closer to the sea, of course. And even our polyhistor Valvasor in the middle of 17th century described the troubles that the traders had with the Bora wind, which is very strong northeastern wind in our region, when they were trying to pass the area of low karst. Later, in 1857, also the railway from Vienna to Ljubljana was prolonged through Postojna and further to Trieste. And Trieste became the main port of Habsburg Empire, or later Austro-Hungarian Empire. And transport on this railway became very, very important, of course. And the bare land, rocky land of landscape, which also, in the other hand, started or influenced the research of the karst phenomena. Also, the state decided that they have to do something with this devastation, degraded landscape, and so they started to implement the different reforestation plans for this region. Several plans were prepared. You can see the Joseph Russell, which was already inventor of the ship's screw. He worked also in this region, and he prepared some plans in 1842 and 1850, but these plans were not executed. Later on, other plans were prepared, and they tried to plant the landscape, the bedrock, the bare landscape with different tree species, and finally they succeeded with an Austrian pine and Pinus nigra. And so they mobilized the local population, the women, the children and men, to plant all these seedlings in the small holes between the rocks. And the men were carrying the soil from valley to the mountain, and the children and women were planting these seedlings, and finally they succeeded to survive the drought and very dry climate and strong wind. And the landscape today is much more green. So from about 30% of forest cover, now it's over 70% of forest cover. So this is the process of this reforestation in the low karst area. So this was a very severe experience for the whole state, and it was absolutely necessary to learn the lesson how not to harvest the forest in the karst area, because the soil erosion is so strong and the soil doesn't run along the slopes to the valleys, but runs into underground through the cracks in the limestone and is lost forever. So you can see this southwestern part of Slovenia is karst, and a little bit to the right, to the east, is SNEZNIK mountain, where this process was somehow stopped. And this is the area of SNEZNIK and Javorniki region. From Postojna, the first part is Javorniki mountain, and the southeastern part is SNEZNIK mountain. It's connected with the dense forest in the area of now it's around 45,000 hectares in one piece without settlements. And this is one of the biggest dense forest area in this part of Europe. So, as I said, the important cognition of all this historical development of low karst area led the decision makers at that period to establish a more stable and more sustainable forest management in the areas where the natural forests were still present. And one of these areas was also the SNEZNIK property, which at that time was just, I would say, borderline with this devastated landscape of karst. And finally, they found the family of Schönburg-Waldenburg from surrounding of Dresden to buy this property in the southern part of the empire and to start to manage the forest in more, I would say, reasonable and sustainable way. This is SNEZNIK Castle, which is at the edge of this property, and it's a very nicely preserved castle, and maybe we will be able to visit it together someday. So from 1853, almost 100 years, this Schönburg-Waldenburg family were the owners of the SNEZNIK forests. They started with 25,000 of hectares, and then these servitude rights were given back to the local farmers. And so now we are talking about 16,000 hectares of forests, something more than 16,000 hectares of forest that they manage in a way I will present now. So first they measured all the area. They establish the units, the compartments, the subcompartments. They do the whole triangulation. They prepare the forest maps. You can see here from 1906 for one of the unit in this property, and it was huge work. It was huge work. They started from zero, from nothing. And they also started to build forest roads because the area was very was not accessible by then, and so they really were the beginner of this forest management. More or less at the same period, at the same time, also in Kočevje region, this is more to the southeastern part of this high karst, the Nerik mountains. The other property of the Auersberg, also you can see similar size of the property, 18,000 hectares. They were also starting to introduce the forest management in these karst, and we can imagine that it was quite an, I could say also kind of revolution that all these foresters which were educated in the German-speaking part of Europe, where they were learning and studying the clear cutting system and the maximum rent, counting the maximum rent of the forest. They saw the problem of this karst landscape, and they decided and they found a different system of forest management. So they refused the clear cut system, and they introduced the unique selection system of forest management. Important in this Kočevje region was Leopold Hufnagel, which prepared these plans. And when they were, the plans were written, they also observed some parts of the virgin forest or very preserved forest, which were not, which were intact by then, and immediately they also decided that this forest will remain intact forever. So we consider this as the first nature conservation remark in the area of Slovenia, that they have to they preserve the part of the forest, two compartments in this Kočevje area, to remain as a virgin forest forever. They also started to prevail to conserve some heritage trees and so on. So it was the start of the nature conservation, which in Slovenia started in forestry. Let's go back to SNEZNIK forests. You can see here a very interesting development of this 16,000 hectare big forest in SNEZNIK property from 1789, when we have some data about the rate or the percentages between conifers and broadleaves, and how, and later on the data starts from 1990s and when they gathered this first data and up to now. So you can see that the percentage of conifers or broadleaves or different tree species were changing through time. Also the growing stock were changing. It was depending on the different situation in the forest and different forest management types and so on. And I will not go very detailed through all this period, and maybe I will just emphasize now this brown line, which shows the population of the red deer. All the foresters in Europe know that the deer could cause some issues or some troubles with the regeneration of the forest, and you can see also in this region it was quite obvious. So in our region, Heinrich Schollmeyer was the main forester. For of course, some other foresters were also present and have some important done some important work also, but Schollmeyer was the one who issues the instructions for stand inventory, for goal setting and measure setting in this area in 1906. And he also introduced a very precise and very strong control method of all the works, all the measures that were done at that time, through the time in each compartment. And so he had the control of what is in the forest, what is have to be done, and what was done, what was executed, what was harvested, and then he could follow the effect of all this work. So in 1912, he prepared this forest management plan, and he also prescribed all these or used all these guidelines from the instructions. Of course, under the influence of the Hufnagel from Kočevje region, he also introduced the selective system of forest management, and he was at that time it was possible because the silver fir was strongly regenerated. There was a lot of silver fir in lower part of the stands, and it was quite nice mixture. And of course, he also looked at economic way. So he wanted, or they wanted to have as much silver fir as possible. So they emphasized the silver fir and cut it out the beech forest, the beech trees. well, this is for 3 units or 4 units: Schneeberg, Leskova Dolina, Maschunen, Georgstal. This is this plan from 1912. It was planned for 10 years. Of course, we still have plans for 10 years. Then, as I said, they developed very well this forest management and forest, or it was needed for a good forestry in this region. And then, after the Second World War, all this property was nationalized. It became a social property in Slovenia. Slovenia was at that part, of course, part of Yugoslavia. Social Federation of Yugoslavia, and different in the whole Slovenia, they established forest enterprises, and the forest enterprises developed or lead it or continuing the management of the forests. Professor Dušan Mlinšek at that period is a very important forester, and he introduced this practice of close to nature management. Almost at the same period, in SNEZNIK region was engineer Gašperšić, later became Professor Gašperšić, was preparing these management plans, and when they were doing the inventory, he noticed that the structure of the forest is not anymore a selective structure as it was in the past. So all these prescriptions, how to do the selective silviculture measures were not good enough, or where the stands were more even-aged. Because I mentioned the juvenile phase of silver fir in the beginning of the 19th century. After 50 years, these silver fir trees were more or less looking at the same age and the same level. So he conducted a very precise analysis of the situation. And then he found out that the silviculture measures or system should be much more adapted to the certain state of the stands of the forest. It was more or less very going together with the idea of Professor Mlinšek, which was also co-founder of ProSilva Fund. And so they started with the new management concept, and they wanted to be more precise and more adapted to the real situation in the forest, real extent of the forest. So they developed this holistic process of analyzing the situation and setting goals and strategies and measures how to do it. Of course, not everything went, maybe in 1971, for the whole Slovenia, for the whole forest management regions, 14 regions we have. In Slovenia, the first regional management plans were implemented. And that meant that we started with this system of management plans all over Slovenia, and irrespective to forest owners. So it was for the all forests, state forest, private forest, social, at that time, social owned forest. Of course, after the war, also the population of deer, not after the Second War, but even after, from the beginning of the 20th century, the population of the deer the red deer became higher and causing much more and more troubles in regeneration of the forest. So the colleagues started to observe their impact much stronger. Of course, it was quite a fight between the foresters and the hunters, who claimed that it's not the deer is not a problem. Also, at that period from 60s and almost 30 years, in this region, there was very huge dying back of silver fir, which was caused mostly from air pollution with the sulfur from northern part of Italy mostly. And so this was very disturbing situation when the grown-up silver fir trees were dying and there was no regeneration of silver fir. But then they fenced some parts of the forest, like half of hectare of 1 hectare, and colleague Ivan Veselic, which was at that time a young engineer in Postojna region, he proved that the impact of the deer is much stronger, as the hunters were able to admit at that period, and that's why also they start to talk, they started to negotiate, and finally they started to reduce the population of deers to enable the regeneration of the forests. Let's go more to the present situation now. As colleague Aleš Poljanec yesterday explained, we have 3 levels of forest management in the regional level, in the unit level, and the silvicultural plans. And we also prepared the the wildlife management plans for 15 regions and hunting areas. There are 3 main principles written in our Forest Act of Republic of Slovenia, which was adopted in 1993. Sustainability, of course, is the main principle. Close to nature forest management is the second, and multifunctional forests or multifunctional tasks of the forests is the third. So everything we do in the forest is done considering all these 3 main principles. So we do the management. Of course, we prepare these management plans for the whole forests, irrespectively to the ownership. Slovenia Forest Service is a public service, so the state is paying this service is from the state budget, is paid to prepare these management plans, and of course the owners and the public has possibilities to include with proposals, with their opinions and so on. And now in this year we are in this process, like Miha mentioned before, in this process where in the whole Slovenia we're preparing the regional 10-year strategic management plans. We have to consider different functions or services of the forest. It depends on the situation again, which of ecological, social or productive function are more emphasized in different areas. We use this evaluation of the forest functions also to adopt the silvicultural system, or to adopt the intensivity of the harvesting and different doing the different measures also for public interests and other social functions. Maybe we didn't emphasize until now that in Slovenia there is allowed public access to all forests. There's certain smaller areas where we border the public access, but anyhow the people can go into the forest even if they are private. They can pick some mushrooms. Of course, it's prescribed the total amount, mushrooms or forest fruits and so on. We consider these social functions also as a very important part, not only the production functions, but also the social functions and of course ecological functions. The main aim, of course, is also to be efficient economically in a long term, not only for this present generation, but in a long term, that we can keep the forest and the efficiency of the forest production for a long term. And you can see on the picture the set of forest management plans for Rivière Machun from 1891 until 2023, and in 2 years from now we will prepare another 10 years plan for this Rivière, for this forest unit. In this graph you can see the amount of harvested wood in the SNEZNIK forest. We are speaking about the area of 16,000 hectares and period from 1902 until 2019, until 2 years ago. So you can see it was quite different in considering from year to year. You can see two gaps, which were, of course, First and the Second World War. And after the Second World War, one very strong peak because at that period, a lot of money was gathered from the forests all over Slovenia, or you can say all over Yugoslavia, to rebuild the country which was destroyed during the war. And then this more or less different levels of annual cut were executed, and the two peaks at the end are we could say also the disasters of last year's climate changes, ice break, which was enormous in 2014 and hit 1/3 of Slovenia, especially our region, very strong. And windbreak in the winter of 2017 and 2018, and both or these disasters, catastrophes, were followed, of course, with the bark beetles attack. So a huge amount of timber were cut and harvested out. We named this salvage cut. But anyhow, following these principles of close to nature forest management, we can say that the nature leads the way. That means that we consider all different types of forests, and we also try to follow or try to consider all these situations about the depth of the soil, the orientation of the slope, and other parts, other factors of the certain stand. Of course, naturally adopted tree species composition is very important, and as much as possible we try to have the forest in the proper condition to regenerate naturally. because maybe I can tell you my experience when I started to work in the forestry. I did small research for my first task, and I had to count all the naturally grown up small trees in the patch of planted area for a few hectares. Sorry, the phone is ringing. So I would say it was the plantation was 3,000 seedlings per hectare, and the same area I counted up to 60,000 naturally grown up small trees. So who knows better, the foresters or those who plant, or the nature? I would say the nature. It's very important also for genetic biodiversity. So there are different, for most of the area, of course, as I said, Abeti Fagetum associations with different sub-associations. You can see one map from one forest unit, and different type of forest, and of course in all these different types we have to adopt our measures to do the work, to do the harvest and everything. And this is one of silvicultural plan, the third level of the area, and the third level of the forest management. And this is for one of compartment of almost 80 hectares in the altitude from 2,000 to 12,000 to 13,000 meters, about sorry, 1,200 to 1,300 meters from the sea level, so quite high. And there are different development phases. There are different setting different goals and different mixture of tree composition. And so different measures are planned to do in the next intervention, I would say, in this forest. The forester's stamp and measure for the diameter are the main tools for foresters. So each tree should be marked for a cutting, and how to decide which tree should be marked is up to the forester. And the main principle in this picking up the trees and for marking is the positive selection. That means that first of all, you have to pick up the trees that you have to that are the most valuable trees, also for increment, and the quality of timber. And you can decide all the competitive trees which are around this single tree, this positive tree. And you mark for the cutting the main competitors of this positive tree. So and of course you can mark also all in different trees. You have to consider the concurrence, the competition in the crowns, and the competition in the underground, of course, in the root systems. So when you decide this, you also have to know whether you do only the thinning, or you want to start the regeneration, or you want to proceed the regeneration if there's already present and you have already the young trees. But the main idea is, I didn't emphasize enough in earlier. The main idea is to have the whole area covered by trees all the time. So we never do the clear cuts. We do the selection in different sizes. It could be bigger or smaller groups, but you always need to have the forest cover present. This is very important in karst, otherwise you can start the erosion of the soil. There's also the technological map for skidding tracks. which are more or less already built in the whole area. So that means that we also prescribe and also the cutting units. The cutting units means 1 unit per 1 forester with the for harvesting, and also for orientation of the skidding of timber. From 2004, when Slovenia joined to European Union, we introduced also Natura 2000 with areas. It was quite a rich, a big work done, and I think there is 36% of Slovenia covered by Natura 2000 areas, and they extend over 54% of Slovenian forests. And if you see, the forest cover in Natura 2000 is 70%. So mostly forests are in Natura 2000 areas in Slovenia, including the vast forest areas in the Nerik Mountains that I'm presenting now, like Kočevje, Javorniki, SNEZNIK, Trnovski Gost, and some other, like in the Alps and in Pohorje region. And most of the state forests, state-owned forests, are also in Natura 2000 sites. So there are different, there are many of forest habitat types and other habitat types that we have to consider, and also plant species like 60 different animal species for forests and 38 for wildlife management are important. And we decided, as colleague Poljanec yesterday emphasized, that we have to integrate these demands of Natura into forest management plan. So we do not prepare a different plan for Natura 2000 areas, but we integrate it into forest and wildlife management plans. And this is one map. You can see different units of Natura 2000. That means that guidelines from Nature Conservation Institute, which are bringing into forestry sector these guidelines for Natura 2000 areas. They also propose different zones considering demands for different species or habitat types, and we join it with the measures to our management plan. So biodiversity somehow in this well-preserved natural forest is very high. We are also working in the area where all 3 large carnivores are living. The bears and wolves populations are thankfully to pass the special projects which bring a lot of work done to improve the situation of the population for this species. They are in good condition. The lynx is not so good because it was extincted and reintroduced in 1973, but now a big project of live lynx is going on, introducing some more animals to improve the genetic basis of these species in the Nerik Mountains and also in the Alps. Of course, there are not only interesting species considering biodiversity, there are a lot more of them, animal species especially. And then we have to do the proper measurements to improve or to enable those populations to survive in our forests. For example, forest reserves, protective forest, which are declared by rules, and also set aside patches, which are designated inside of forest management plans. There are different sizes in different composition all over the area. The deadwood, we were already speaking about the deadwood in different demands for a deadwood in the area. You can see also, as colleague Nagel yesterday explained, the situation about the woodpeckers in this area, like white-backed and brittle woodpecker. You can see also that in our forest, it's not necessary that they are present only in protected areas, but they are also present in the managed forest. And I would say it would be very interesting to research some more which are these measures of forestry, because obviously something we are doing right, that these specialist species are living also in the managed forests. For example, you can see also caves like light blue. There are 16,600 caves in our region. And as I said before, it was not present water streams or rivers. So small water pits are very important. Especially the hunters are keeping these water pits also for improve the biodiversity and for the good of the game. Considering all these caves, also for bears, it's not a problem to find a proper den in our region. And finally, let's go to the protected area. Maybe from link from the past, up in 1980, when Professor Minšek brought out the idea about the forest reserves. Only smaller areas around the SNEZNIK mountain were designated as forest reserves. But in 80s, there was very strong pressure of local authorities to develop the ski slope area in SNEZNIK, to cut the area and start the touristic development and so on. And then our colleague Živan Veselić, former vice director of Slovenia Forest Service, was in strong opposition of this, and he presented to the public widely the importance of this area and the preserving of this area. And after this, I would say, storm passed, the foresters decided to connect these different smaller forest reserves into one big forest reserve, which became the biggest reserve in Slovenia, with almost 800 hectares of the cover. And this area was then picked up for the nomination for UNESCO Heritage. You can see also that as you know, our protective buffer zone is quite narrow all around the SNEZNIK forests, and we already prepared the proposal to widen a little bit this protected zone. We strongly believe that our type of forest management and forest measure that we are conducting in the area all around, as I described, is not causing too much problems or too much influence into the core area of the reserve, and this shape of protected zone is enough for ensuring the intact area inside. So let me finish with some pictures of this our SNEZNIK. You can see one big rock brought by a glacier from the top somewhere into this spot nearby the peak of SNEZNIK. We can recognize the influence of the glaciers in SNEZNIK now also in this time, and as we speak about development of beech forest ecosystems all over the Europe after the ice ages, we also can remind ourselves with such rocks that it was really different situation at 10 years or 12,000 years ago. And now we have completely different situation, different forests, but still we have to consider all this development and influences in social, political and economical society to understand the processes and to follow the nature processes. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so Špela, the first question was on the chat from Frederick. How do Slovenian foresters appreciate your close to nature approach, and how do forest contractors see this type of
how the Slovenian foresters appreciate this close to nature? We are learned to do this, and this is our way to do this, and there's not in discussion whether to do this or not. As I said, it's written in our Forest Act, and it's I didn't emphasize so strongly the rules of forest protections, which brings very accurate demands how to protect the biodiversity and how to emphasize the biodiversity and so on. So this is part of our legislation.
Thank you, Špela. Next one, Martin is having some questions. Martin, would you like to maybe ask directly, Špela, or shall I read it? Martin presented quite some questions. Do you use criteria such as target DBH or optimum growing stock for hectare in close to nature forest management?
Yes. We use also all these models that probably all foresters know, models for different forest types. We also use these models. Our forest sites are grouped into forest management classes, and we prepare the models for these classes depending on the tree composition, type of forests, sites, and so on. And of course, we do have this target diameter and so on, and also targeted growing stock in certain classes. So when we prepare this management plan, we use these models. We compare the present situation with the optimal situation of optimal model, and from this different we see whether we should do the regeneration more faster than it is, which phases is in lacking, or which phases is too high, and then from this we prescribe the amount of harvest. So in our forest management plan, you do not find a prescribed harvest amount, but maximum possible harvest. That means that in the state forests, mostly we execute 100% of prescribed harvest, but in private forests, it's up to the owners to decide. They are not forced to cut or to harvest their forests, but it's up to them to decide whether and when they want, they need, and so on. So obviously, for this reason, the executed prescribed harvest is it's much lower in the private forest comparing to the state forest. But you cannot harvest more than it's prescribed. Did I answer the question? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Špela. One more question from Radu. Do you apply the close to nature principle in all forests or only in where there are natural restrictions? If most of the state forests are included in Natura 2000 sites, how do you manage the economics of the state forests, and how many bears do you have in all forests?
Okay, the last question is the easiest one. We have 1,000 bears. It's the estimation of the population. Yes, it's changing through time, but in last year the bear population raised and it's around 1,000 bears in Slovenia. It depends how many of them goes to Croatia or not, because those the population of Croatian and Slovenian bears is the same population. They don't know. They don't consider political borders. Okay.
Špela, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. Close to nature forest is a principle in all Slovenia. As I said, is prescribed in the in our legislation. So everyone should follow it. In Natura 2000, for example, it's not allowed to plant alien species. Although there are some debate in last years after this huge impact of the ice break and windbreak to consider maybe some species, because, for example, some species stand up much stronger. Or they prove they are stronger in certain disasters, comparing to spruce, for example. And the economy of this, yes, of course, our management plans have also the economical part. It's not reasonable that it wouldn't be. And yes, considering the price of the timber wood in the market, our income, clean income, is about around 30 to 50 euros per cubic meter. So if you want to compare with the situation in your, I'm talking about one, for example, one of forest management unit in SNEZNIK region. We calculate in the plan what are the costs of all the measures which are planned, what is the price of the wood in the market, what are other investments in the forest, for example, improving the forest roads or building a new skidding tracks and so on. So under the line, it remains around 30 euros per cubic meter.